So I have a few big advantages in this, in that I wrote 13 novels, which I've talked about before I published, and majority of those, just over half, I would say, were in the Cosmere. Now, the first book I wrote that is in the Cosmere is Elantris. When I wrote Elantris, I had no idea about all of this, right? I was just writing a book. But then I started writing Dragonsteel, and I'm like, ooh, this will tie in this interesting way. And then I wrote Aether of Night, where I'm like, oh yeah, those pools that I put in Elantris that I have no idea why they're there. Let's put one in here, and I'll start dealing with that and thinking about it. And Way of Kings and the original attempts at Mistborn and all of these things were all of these sort of trial runs. When I got published, when I sold Elantris, I sat down and I did a big sort of revision to all of that, saying, what do I really want to do? Like, I put the shard pool in Elantris having no idea what it was. I was just there, right? It was just something for me to pick up later and do something with. Well, where I picked that up with is when I was writing the outline for the Mistborn trilogy and looking at it really close and saying, you know, what do I want to do? What are the themes? Things that happened in Dragonsteel that I planned as an outline. I'm like, what if this is the foundational event for building the Cosmere? That's where the shards came from and stuff. And so I had this huge advantage that I'd written a bunch of books that I could make mostly canon in my head that no one else would have access to, that already had all of these ideas that I could then foreshadow, right? Like the conversations between Hoyd and Frost. Frost is a character from Dragonsteel. And so that's a big advantage. Other than that, I am an outliner, so I've come up with some outlines, and I found that outlines need a lot of flexibility, even if I'm an outliner. And so I make notes of, I am saying this thing here, and this is why I'm saying it right now, but I give myself the freedom to tweak those things. One of the reasons I've not been firm on what the names of the 16 shards are is because I want that flexibility to be able to say, no, this is what the Cosmere needs, is a persona like this that has a shard, and the shard doing this. By the time Rhythm of War comes out, I think we will have canonized all 16 or very close to all 16. But I wanted to take my time doing that. So the best thing I can give you as advice as someone who has done it is, whenever you're writing something that you intend to be foreshadowing, make a note to yourself while you're putting it in what the foreshadowing means. Just remind yourself what you've canonized and what your intent behind that was in the story, so that later on when you come back to it, you can be like, oh, you know, my view on this has evolved, but I can't change this because this I've already talked about. So let's make sure we stick to that, because you need that balance of flexibility, but also you need to stick to your guns. Like, I will forgive quite a bit from authors. Like, a good example is J.K. Rowling, right? You know, even if you have something planned, as you're writing a book, it is really hard to get a book written and to have it all connect together. I think she did a pretty darn good job, all things considered. Granted, the magic system, as we've talked about, generally you have to pretend the new spells they learn are only very valid for that book for whatever reason, and don't ask yourself, why don't they use a time turner here? She's pretty good at consistency inside a book, but how well that all came together is actually really well done. But what I don't like is I don't like the kind of flagrance that some properties take for just tossing out continuity repeatedly. I understand the kind of rule of cool, but it bugs me.